How have you been?
Hey, not bad, you know. We used to work together.
Yes.
Not so long ago.
Do you know when the first time we met face to face?
That was during your interview at Facebook. It was still called Facebook at the time.
And I had to do 25 interviews to get the job, you know, including multiple with you, actually.
Yeah, it was 2 or 3 with me. Yeah, that's right.
So, but at the end, we turned out we were kind of agreeing on a lot of things.
On a lot of things.
Yes, which is going to make the conversation pretty boring, right? If we just
no, there's a few things we might disagree on, or at least we can fake that we disagree on.
All right. Yeah. So before we just came here, you were telling me like your opinions on language models.
They suck.
Wait, I'm building a company on these language models, and now you tell me they suck?
No, they're useful. Okay, so there's a lot of really great applications of LLMs. I call them autoregressive LLMs because this is really what sucks about them. It's not the LLM part, it's the autoregressive part. And so, yeah, they suck. They hallucinate, you know that. You have to fine-tune them with human feedback for thousands of hours for them to barely kind of spit out something that makes sense. And they still hallucinate. They can be jailbroken. You can type prompts that will make them spew nonsense. They can't really reason. They can't really plan. They can't really satisfy goals. They don't understand the world.
Okay, so who here has used a language model in the past month? ChatGPT, you know, if you don't like it. Yeah. Did you expect that, though, to happen so fast?
Yeah,
weren't you impressed, though, by how good, you know?
Okay, so I was not surprised by ChatGPT. I was surprised by, I was not surprised by the power of self-supervised learning, which is really the thing that powers all those things, right? So the way those things are trained is that you take a piece of text, you remove some of the words, you train the gigantic neural net to predict the words that are missing, right? They're all trained this way. And the extent to which this works well is pretty amazing. It's pretty surprising. I've been advocating for self-supervised learning for almost a decade now. So, I mean, that's the thing I was kind of saying, this is what we should do, and it turned out to actually work really well. So I was only mildly surprised by the success. That combined with the transformer architecture, which turned out to be really powerful for various things. And then the idea that by just training a system to predict the next word in a text, you get those kind of amazing things. We've known this for a number of years before, like 2 or 3 years before ChatGPT came out. Now, the broad public got really captivated by ChatGPT, and that surprised everyone. Because at Meta, we put out a bunch of demo systems that were basically LLMs that were for specialized
Remember, I was trying to sell them internally. I couldn't get anybody to buy them. You know?
Nobody in the product groups, OK? You couldn't sell that to the legal department who say, like, oh, my God, if those things kind of say stupid things, we're going to get sued left and right. And the government is going to write us and say, like, why are you putting those in the market? And Google had the same issue. That's why they didn't produce an LLM before ChatGPT, because they had the technology. And then we put out a few of those. So we had one called Galactica, which I think came out after you left.
No, it was before. Yeah.
Oh, just before, yes. Yeah. And so this was an LLM that was. So it came out about a year ago, a fall before ChatGPT, like 3 weeks before ChatGPT. And it was designed to help scientists write scientific papers. It was trained on the entire scientific literature. Very useful. It was trashed, murdered on all social networks. People saying, oh, you're going to destroy society with this. Any stupid person that can write a scientific paper that sounds authoritative. And this is going to be horrible. Basically, society is going to end. Civilization is going to disappear. So after 3 days, we had to take it down. The people designing it couldn't sleep at night, so they took it down. I thought it was a mistake. And then 3 weeks later, ChatGPT was made available, and this was the second coming of the Messiah, right? So, so no, I wasn't surprised. Or the surprise came 2 or 3 years before.
It's going to be the meme, like not impressed, LeCun. Yeah.
Oh, I've been criticized for saying this.
Yes. But are you worried, though, about what we can do with these LLMs,
Well, I mean, first you need to be excited, and then worried about the consequences of systems that are not reliable, not controllable, don't understand the world, can't plan, et cetera. Yes, of course. I mean, my prediction, okay, this may be controversial. I'm sure you all agree. But my prediction is that within 5 years, probably earlier, nobody in their right mind will use autoregressive LLMs.
I disagree. I think they're...
We'll have something better.
Oh, all right.
Okay, and so the question
I'm waiting for you to design it for me, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what we're working on.
Yeah.
But so the question is whether we'll make this work well enough within 5 years and hopefully within 3 years. But I think ultimately the future AI systems of tomorrow will be very different from today's. In fact, they won't even be generative. That's a shock.
You heard it here.
They won't be autoregressive. They won't be generative. They won't even be language models because they will deal with the real world. They will be able to learn from video, like a baby human. Like a cat. Your cat is smarter than any LLM. Doesn't have the same amount of knowledge, but in many ways it's smarter.
Yeah, I think you underplay a little bit. Like I do think that what we can do with language was surprising. The fact that there's so much encoding in the world in these language models, and the fact that it can recompose that knowledge in a way that's surprising. So I do think the kind of application we can do today. So in my company, we use it for learning, to get to solve any kind of problems. Come on, be honest. 2 years, 3 years ago, we didn't know it would get to that level that fast.
Sure, but it's a very superficial kind of intelligence, right? I mean, those systems, are trained to produce the next word or the next tokens, whatever. And they obey the statistics of their training data and the fine-tuning if they've been fine-tuned. But there are very basic concepts about the world that they just do not capture. So for example, if they know that A is the same as B, they don't necessarily know that B is the same as A. If they know that A is larger than B and B is larger than C, they don't necessarily know that A is larger than C.
Yeah, but now that they heard you and they are trained on that data, they'll be able to do it. Remember, that works. Every time you give an example, then there's a model that's trained on it.
Then he gets yeah, so in fact, there is a story about this. A couple of years ago, a philosophy professor at NYU asked on Twitter, David Chalmers, he's a specialist of philosophy of mind. He said, like, is there a question I could ask ChatGPT or GPT-3, I think at the time, that it wouldn't be able to solve? And I came up with an example. I said, imagine you have a bunch of gears, right, that are all, connected with their neighbors. And you have 7 gears. You turn gear number 3
yeah, I know that example.
In the clockwise direction. In what direction will gear number 7 turn? And of course, you just have to count if it's an even or odd number to figure out like in which direction. And GPT-3 got it wrong. ChatGPT, the first version, 3.5, got it wrong. And then someone...
And GPT-4 got it right.
And GPT-4 got it right. So I said, OK, but maybe it's been trained on my tweets, where I explained this problem, because we didn't know. So maybe it knew the answer for this. So I say, here is another problem. Now put the 7 gears on a circle. OK, so each gear is connected with the next gear, kind of entangled with it. Now I turn gear number 3. In what direction will gear number 7 turn? And that's a trap, because they can't turn. There's an odd number of gears, and so you can't turn. And GPT-4 got it wrong.
Yeah. But that's the little trick. So what I see in my current usage, is that, yes, it's true. It's not general intelligence. Actually, you and I agree that general intelligence doesn't mean much anyway. But the trick is that it's trained on so much data, it's kind of overfitting its training set. But that training set is so wide that it can be useful for a lot of things. So
it is useful. It is useful. There's no question.
In my application, it's very good at solving like high school problems because it has been trained on almost all the high school problems you can imagine, on all the AP courses and stuff. So that's a little bit the dirty secret of GPT-X is that it's trained on a lot of things that you are gaming in it, but it's still pretty impressive. Like in my company, I'll tell you, like all the developers cannot, develop without it anymore.
Of course. No,
it's an amazing partner.
I mean, certainly for, as a help for code writing, it's fantastic. If you remember that those systems basically do approximate retrieval with some recombination of things, I think you get a good idea of what they're capable of doing, and purely from text, right? Now, the thing is, they can't invent new things. So a lot of people are saying, oh, it would be dangerous to have open source models of this type because you put this in the hands of terrorists and they're going to be able to get the steps of how you design a lethal pathogen or something like that, right? And people have done this experiment, and the answer is, it accelerates a little bit the information you could get from Google, but you get the same information from Google.
Yeah, people say like, you're going to get GPT to create new businesses. Not going to happen, right? But you mentioned the open source stuff. I saw you signed that letter.
Yeah, it was a letter put by the Mozilla.
I signed it too, actually, this morning.
Foundation. Thanks for signing it too. Yeah, I've been a big advocate of open source AI platforms. Which I think is the future, regardless of whether governments try to ban it or not. It's going to happen. And the people who are against that are people who think that AI technology is too dangerous to put it in the hands of everyone. And so they're trying to kind of get it, they're trying to lobby governments to kind of regulate it, either for reasons that are sincere, they're genuinely worried about dangers, or just because they want regulatory capture. And I'm not going to name names about who is, from one or the other but the most vocal people who are in favor of this kind of regulation at the research and development level are people from OpenAI, from DeepMind.
You're not naming people.
And from Anthropic. I'm not naming names. I'm not saying who is motivated by regulatory capture or genuinely worried about dangers. But I think they're all wrong.
So I agree with you on this, which is, I think the way to understand the system, the best way is to open them and get people to actually experience them, research on them. I find that you're a little bit to delve into our disagreements, like you're a bit too optimistic. I think there are really use cases of AI, and we were chatting before about even our own prior company, we were at Meta together, right? If you have the wrong objective, I think it can have pretty negative impact on humanity.
Yeah, that's true. So just get the right objectives.
All right, but what's the way to get there, right? That's the question, right?
It's hard.
It can't be just the good of the heart of the people doing it, right? And trusting them.
I don't think so. I mean, that's one reason why you want those platforms to be open source. So first of all, okay, here's another reason why autoregressive LLMs suck. They're not controllable. The only way you can control what they're going to say is by training them to say the right things for particular prompts. Unfortunately, the space of possible prompts is, infinite dimensional, essentially. It's combinatorial. You cannot cover all the cases by just fine-tuning the system on lots of prompts. It's just too high dimensional of a space. And so you're not going to be able to reduce, to eliminate hallucination or to get the system to actually fulfill goals, be driven by a goal that you give it. You're not going to be able to make sure that it doesn't spew nonsense or discriminatory outputs or things like that, right? So if you want to fix this, you have to change the architecture. And my prediction, where I say that 5 years from now nobody would use autoregressive LLMs, is because I believe that we're going to have better architectures. I made one proposal along those directions. It's called objective-driven AI. And the idea is that the output that the system produces is driven by a set of objective functions that the system needs to optimize when it plans an answer. So first of all, it plans an answer. It doesn't just spew one word after the other. It thinks about what it's going to say. And then it optimizes what it's going to say so as to satisfy the various criteria. Am I answering the question? Is my answer understandable by a 13-year-old because I'm talking to a 13-year-old? Et cetera, is it going to destroy humanity or whatever, right? So, I mean, you can have a whole bunch of guardrails of this type. And then the system is purely safe if you can come up with the right guardrails. So it's very much unlike current LLMs. And then the question becomes, how do you design those guardrails,
right? And who designs them, right? And
who trains them, because they can be trained. And this has to be done with contributions from everybody all around the world. Those systems eventually, maybe 5, 10 years from now, let's say 10, all of our interactions with the digital world will be mediated by an AI system, an AI assistant, which eventually will become smarter than us. Okay, it will be working for us. We set the goals for them, but they might be smarter than us. But this is not different from being a...
All right, are you trying to make a prediction there? Or
yes.
Like when you say smarter than us, do you have a time frame? I've never heard you actually make a prediction on that one.
No, this may be much harder than we think. It's probably harder than...
Do you think you'll see it in your lifetime?
I'm looking at the age of the people here. Maybe...
your lifetime. I'm talking
in the lifetime of some people here. Mine, I'm not sure.
I don't think so. Actually.
I don't know. I mean, I think we're going to have pretty, really smart systems within 10 years, certainly within 20 years. maybe not as smart as humans in all the domains where humans are smart, but in a relatively large number of domains, including planning and acting in the world and things like that, right? Which is not the case for LLM. That's the other reason LLM sucks. So,
but you make all this prediction, like, all right, so you wake up this morning, okay? Mm-hmm. You made your breakfast. No AI made your breakfast for you, right? You took a car or something here. No AI drove your car for you, right? Mm-hmm. No AI received you. Like, what has AI done for you today? So we talk about all these wild predictions of like, oh, they're going to be smarter than us, and they're so smart. But
well, that's in the future.
Okay,
that's what we're working on.
With all this buzz,
Okay, today. So today there's something you know better than me, which is AI is used massively for content ranking, content moderation on social networks, communication networks, email, like everything, right? There are AI systems working in the background to filter things like hate speech, false accounts,
system that were paying your salary and mine.
That's right. And also ranking for ads and newsfeed and things like that. It's called feed now, not newsfeed anymore. For Instagram, all that stuff. That's probably the biggest, in terms of revenue, that's the biggest use of AI. Not just at Meta, it's true also for YouTube and for for all kinds of TikTok, certainly. Okay. So yeah, that's probably the biggest deployment. You have to set the right cost, the right objectives there too, right? Because if you set the wrong objectives, people get addicted, and then at the end of the day, they think they've wasted their time. And so you have to do this right so that they feel fulfilled by the time they spend. It's not easy, and it's an iterative
I tried to change that when I was at Meta, which was to change the objectives of our ranking systems.
And by the way, thanks to this guy and to scientists developing the technology, the proportion of hate speech that is automatically taken down by AI systems on Facebook went from 23% in 2017 to 95% last year. And it's, progress of AI. So people are saying AI is going to cause like massive disinformation on social networks. Right now, AI is actually the solution to those problems.
I'm not sure I agree with you on this one. Remember, there was actually even this there was this post made by Mark actually on borderline content. So when we were at Meta, right, and trying to do content moderation, we're almost fighting the team doing content recommendation. Yeah. Because the recommender system were optimizing for engagement, and when you have borderline content, people love that. The things that is juicy and maybe not completely true. Yeah. And so you had a system trying to bring it down and a system trying to promote it, and everything that was close to the borderline of like the policy was shooting up the roof. So,
so you have to set the threshold. I think it's hard.
Complicated, And hard. Who do you?
I mean, we're faced with those kind of things all the time, right? You having lunch and at a restaurant, and the server comes and says, "Well, we have this beautiful chocolate cake for dessert," and you say like, "That's not reasonable. I've eaten enough already." And then he brings the chocolate cake, and you say like, and your lizard brain says, "Calories, just get it now," right? And your frontal cortex says, maybe not. And then there's a fight internally in your brain about, those two things fight. It's the same story, right? You can have different objectives, different criteria, and balancing them for the thing to do the right thing is complicated. Yeah. Balancing the long term and the short term, things like that.
I think one thing you and I agree is that, I'm not a doomer. I don't think you're a doomer.
No.
I don't know. Who is afraid that AI is going to take over the world in the next 10 years?
Or kill us all?
There are some people.
Okay, a couple.
So
hands.
Personally, I don't buy that because I think it's not as smart as people think, and also it does what you tell it to do in the context, right? We're not going to give it like the button on the nuclear weapon anytime soon. But it has these effects, especially when you deploy at scale, that are harder to understand. Actually, I'm glad to hear you talk about that. I feel sometimes we brush over, especially AI at scale, right? When you have a system with a single objective that impacts, a billion people at the same time, it's tricky.
That's true, and it's never going to work with a single objective.
Exactly.
It's going to have to be a collection of objectives, some of which ensure safety, guardrails, some of which ensure, is it fulfilling the action? The thing that we asked it to do. But the answer to this is to have those explicit objectives that are optimized by the system at runtime, not at training time. That's the main difference with current systems. And if we have those, we can have a set of objectives that make them subservient to us. So that despite the fact that they might be extremely smart, they will still do our bidding.
And more personalized even,
goals.
maybe. So the objective is more local to the person themselves, right?
Yeah, but they would be designed in a way that they do our bidding, despite the fact that they can be very smart. We have this idea somehow that if an entity is smart, it wants to dominate. And first of all, this is not even true within the human species. It's not the smartest among us who want to be the.
I saw your tweet on this one, yeah.
It's true in the animal kingdom, and I mean, what's true in humans and animal kingdom is that some individuals want to dominate, others are fine with submitting, and this is a characteristic of social species. It's true for humans, for baboons, for chimpanzees, for wolves. It's not true for orangutans. Orangutans are almost as smart as we are. They don't have any dominance or submission behavior because they're not social animals, they're solitary. So it's not something that is linked with intelligence, right? The desire to dominate. It's something that evolution hardwired into our brain because that's our way to survive in society. But
it does give you more power to your ambition to dominate, though.
Okay, but if your ambition is to satisfy the goals that are given to you, and we know a lot of people who are exactly like that, right? They are problem solvers. You give them a problem, they solve it, right? They might be much smarter than you, but they're not going to take your job as their manager, if you want. And I mean, we have tons of examples of this. Like, any politician have entire staff of people who are way smarter than them, and they're still the boss, right? That's how it's going to be with AI systems of the future.
All right, we talk a lot about doom, but I challenge you a little bit on, what has AI done for you today? But what do you hope AI will do for us? Like, what's your prediction?
Well, so today it's a.
Remember, I had this bet with Jitendra, which actually I lost, by the way, on self-driving cars, which I thought would come earlier, and it's still not around.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, certainly a writing aid, certainly a lot of.
With something fundamental, like what do you think will change first?
Okay, so what's going to change over the next?
I have a bet because I'm working on learning on education, so
yes.
I think that's going to be...
education is going to be a big application. Healthcare, a big application. It's already the case.
It hasn't happened though. It's forever. Yeah.
It's happening because it's taking time because you need
culture.
Well, it's also like authorization from the FDA and clearance and all that stuff. I mean, driving assistance is a huge positive impact of AI. It reduces frontal collision by 40%. Like, it saves lives, right? I mean, it's nothing to sneeze at. It's just a convolutional net looking at your windshield. It's actually required now for every car sold in Europe, automatic emergency braking system.
But when do you think we'll have self-driving car on the roads everywhere?
So this is going to take a while because currently the self-driving cars that actually are practical, that are completely self-driving in San Francisco, for example, the Cruise, and which actually was just
shut down,
and Waymo, they cheat, right? So the thing that they drive in is completely mapped out. They know the location of all the lights and street and stop signs and blah blah blah, and they use lidars on all kinds of like weird sensors, and so they cheat. And by cheating and having hundreds of engineers taking care of all the corner cases, you can have a self-driving car. But why is it that any 17-year-old can learn to drive a car in 20 hours? Like, why is it that we can't get this with machine learning? That we can't just put a machine learning system in a car and it could learn to drive in 20 hours like any teenager? And so the fact that we can't do this tells you how far we are from reproducing human intelligence and human learning. And I'm going to tell you another example. How is it that any 10-year-old in one try, in a few minutes, can learn to clear up the dinner table and fill up the dishwasher? May not want to do it.
I don't know. My kids don't do it.
But they can. They're smart enough to do it, and they can learn it in one try. We don't have robots that come anywhere close to being able to do this.
Robots have been so disappointing.
Yeah, and it's because we don't have techniques. Like, what's surprising is that language is incredibly simple. It's surprising because language is something we think is, only humans can do, so it's got to be complicated. No, language is super simple. And it's because language is discrete, it's finite to some extent, right? It's
designed to be simpler, actually.
It's designed to be a good communication system over noisy channels, so it has to be discrete. And so it's relatively simple. It can be that complicated because it only popped up in the last few 100,000 years in evolution. So And it's basically controlled by two areas in our brain that are about this big on this side of the brain.
So what's your prediction on self-driving? I mean, do you think you'll see it in the next, I don't think we'll get it in the next 5 years.
Okay, so the next challenge is to be able to
I'm trying to give you a hard prediction. You're avoiding my, I wanted you to put some hard stuff and then we can compare.
I'm telling you about the steps, right? So the first step that we have to solve is, and I've been working on this for 8 years, but we've made a lot of progress in the last year, is getting machines to learn how the world works by watching the world go by video, just watching video. Because there is a lot more knowledge, human knowledge even, about the world that we acquire when we are babies in the first few months of life than the kind of knowledge that we acquire through language. We think that all of the knowledge is language related, but it's not. Most of our knowledge is actually related to the physical world. And it's true, certainly true of animals, right? Animals don't need language to learn all the stuff they learn, and they're pretty smart. You ever seen a cat planning to jump on a piece of furniture? It's pretty amazing. We can do this with robots. So the first step is, can we get machines to learn how the world works by watching the world go by watching videos? Then can we...
Yeah, and to explain, right, in a similar way that right now, they learn language, but it's just reading language, right? So the idea is that it's the self-supervision method, right? Just by observing rather than just training with some objectives. That's the key.
Sure, but like, for example, a very simple piece of knowledge, right? If I shake this table, there's a point at which, in a particular way of shaking it, the bottles are going to fall, right? Like, how do I, like, do you think any LLM can figure this out? No. Like, unless it's described somewhere in their training set in a very explicit way.
Unless you already mentioned that example somewhere else. Right?
That's right, unless, this is being recorded and it's going to be in the next training set for the next LLM, where, but we deal with this all the time. So, for example, and this is relevant to the discussion about safety. Let's say you're planning to go from here to Paris. Okay, so what you have to do is, that's a task, right? Decompose this into sub-goals. First goal, get to the airport. Second goal, catch a plane. And it's still early in the day, you can probably do this and fly tonight. How do I get to the airport? Well, I go down in the street and hail a taxi. You can do this in New York, right? How do I go down in the street? I have to get out of this building, and find a good street where there's lots of taxis. How do I get out of this building? I have to lift from my chair, go through the door, blah, blah, blah. How do I lift from my chair? Or I have to push on my arms and, et cetera. And you can see decomposition of this task down to millisecond by millisecond muscle control. This is called hierarchical planning. No AI system today is capable of doing anything like this. This is a very basic reasoning and planning ability that a lot of animals have, and humans certainly do have. We have no idea how to do this with machines. And we have ideas that just haven't been implemented in ways that work. Right?
All this to say, you still haven't answered my question. So maybe we can ask some of the audience to ask us questions. Maybe I'll get you to make some predictions that after we can test.
I'll tell you the step, right? Learning from video, learning to plan from world models that predict what's going to happen in the world as a consequence of your actions, and then if you can satisfy goals, and then do this hierarchically. Is it going to take 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? I don't know. But we're working on it.
Yeah. You still didn't answer. Have some questions? You have microphones?
I'm going to allow 2 questions. So choose one. Who wants to have the first one? Just raise your hand. There's a you can use a microphone in front of you. Roman, can you just put them on? Thank you. Cheers.
Yeah, I raised my hand earlier. I don't think AI is going to kill us. I think it might help us kill each other. And I'm not necessarily talking about physical killing. I think more about the mental cost of elevating the noise in the room when you're in a restaurant, right? Where you start talking louder, and in order to be heard, you speak even louder as a result of that. And when I look at what we did with our phones, I think you don't need to be a scientist or an expert to know that something's off with the way we use our phones and how we are so super connected. And I guess it's a trick question, obviously, but the first question is why we're doing this in the first place. Do we need help? And then who is going to be in charge of telling what the rules are of that why? And so far, it's not clear. There's a lot of questions raised around that, but there's no answer yet.
For solving that problem, we need more AI, not less. Email would be completely unusable if we didn't have spam filters, right? a lot of us use Gmail because they have a really good spam filter. And it also automatically kind of classifies emails. If you had,
I disagree with that.
If you had a completely chronological feed on any social network you have, it would be completely boring and useless.
Here you're being a salesman, like selling you,
We've done the experiment, we know.
Yes, but there is a responsibility in the system, right? Today, that's using AI to keep you hooked on it, right?
That's why we need open source AI platforms.
And when you look at LLM, right? I mean, I agree with you. One of the big challenge, I'm worried about it. I think it's going to make the internet, the web, actually, a lot less interesting because it makes creating content that's hard to distinguish from human content so much. So I think that I'm not very optimistic for the future of the web, actually. Like the content, the quality, and I'm worried about my kids and even myself spending too much time on these phones, So I think people should be worried.
I'm much more positive because there's a website that every one of you should know called the Pessimist Archive. And it's hilarious because it's a lot of news clips about moral panics that existed every time there was a new technology, a new communication technology.
I'm not a doomer like this, but
Huh?
I'm not a doomer like this. I think but it's slowly eroding things. That's what makes the problem. Like slowly you get more time on your phone. Slowly
but it also makes it better,
good,
right?
So
I mean, it's like you're using calculators. You can't do mental arithmetics anymore, right? So I mean, it's the same phenomenon. So no, I think AI is actually going to make that better, but it's going to mediate, as I said, in some future, all of our interaction with the digital world. But there is a way this can go really bad. And the way it can go bad is if those platforms are controlled by 2 or 3 companies on the west coast of the US and maybe a couple in China. That would be terrible. Yeah. That would be that's my nightmare scenario. That's what keeps me up at night. And for me, the only solution to that problem is that base AI systems must be open source.
Yeah, I agree with that. Transparency, I think, is what's in the system, what keeps us there, why, and make it clear to everybody so they can dig into it. I would agree with that.
It's just like the software infrastructure of the internet. It's all open source.
Yes.
And there's a good reason for it.